The other thing that would be handy on the part of this Prime Minister would be if he would actually take note of what's going on in Ballymena right now. Fortunately, some of the worst of the rioting, of the unrest, seems to have died down after the last couple of nights. But 4 or 5 nights in a row, Ballymena just erupted. Furious rioting the length and breadth of the town, running battles with the police, look at that, throwing firebombs, petrol bombs, really bad, really bad. The authorities, Michelle O'Neill, the Northern Ireland First Minister, the local police chief, basically saying far right thugs, yeah, mindless violence. Not heard much from the Prime Minister about this. The truth is they're writing about the migrant crisis. They're writing about the fact that 2 14-year-old Romanian migrant kids, boys, were in court at the beginning of last week charged with the oral rape of a local girl. Sexual crimes committed by migrants in concerned communities are a recipe. That's a tinderbox, that is, and it exploded in Ballymena. Nigel Farage warns that because this government is just not listening to the reason for this unrest, there will be more of these riots across Britain throughout another summer of discontent. Let's talk to Stephen Walsh, migration expert, and he's director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, welcome to the show. I'm right, aren't I? 5 days of really serious rioting in Ballymena. I didn't hear a single local politician or police chief, local dignitary, anyone acknowledge what these riots were about. They just kept saying mindless violence, far-right racists, racism, that's the only way to dress this up. Well, you can call it that if you like. But just like Southport last year, where they just tried to dismiss the reasons for the riots as just thuggery, people who like violence, people who are far right and like to destroy things, without addressing what was really going on. It was disquiet over the migrant crisis. Well, just like last year, they're doing it again in Ballymena. Nigel Farage, and he's not alone, warning that by not listening to the reasons for these riots, we are probably in for another summer of discontent, more riots. We've got to get our government, got to get people in power, the authorities, police chiefs, politicians, to acknowledge what this trouble is all about. If they don't, it's just going to get worse, right?
Well, Kevin, your analysis that it's going to get worse is absolutely right. And the analysis that you've made that the politicians in Northern Ireland, the police, the media, are all following the same stick that we've just had to deal with on your show a few moments ago, where you have the terrible abuse of girls up and down the country, and abuse as it was, based on the idea that it was all about immigration. We can't talk about it. Anyone who's opposed to the idea of mass immigration has got to be criticised. In the case of the girls, we'll ignore it because it can't possibly be Pakistani Muslim gangs who are doing this, and it will upset the community. Now we have the same arguments as you saw in Southport last year, where this is all about people being the far right. The same language our Prime Minister used when he suggested that we should not have a national inquiry about the grooming gangs. And that comes down to one thing. It is that they are frightened of the public, recognizing now that their policies of mass immigration have led to such division in this nation, increased levels of criminality, people getting benefits that are not entitled to benefits, including housing, as you saw in Ballymena, a small, tight-knit community of 30,000 people, and now they're experiencing what mass illegal migration and mass uncontrolled migration does on a small town.
Absolutely, and if you go all the way back to where summer rioting kind of became a national hobby back in 1981, the Brixton riots, to be fair, the police, the government, politicians immediately started looking into what the cause of these riots were. What caused these people to erupt in violence, into rioting, into fighting with the police? What is it that they're complaining about? That is the way to approach a riot, yes, as you analyse it, post-analyse it, post-mortem. What we do now, or this government's style, Keir Starmer's style, is, don't fancy looking into the reasons for this. Let's pretend it's utterly mindless, that in fact there's no reason for it. He actually, last summer, after Southport and the other riots, he kept going out of his way to say, this is not protest, these aren't protests. Well, we don't condone the form of the protests. Of course we don't condone the setting fire of asylum seeker hotels, mosques, running battles with the police, throwing bricks at them. Of course we condemn all that. But just because they're using these, or some of them are using these criminal methods to register their protest, it shouldn't be a reason for politicians to just say, right, well, they've been a bit violent, so let's not even listen to what the hell it is they're moaning about. That is, that's a pressure cooker. That's like a volcano building up, building up. So the more that this government, Keir Starmer especially, refuses to address what the cause of Ballymena is, what the cause of Southport was, and what the cause of the future riots this summer that we all fear may happen will be, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, isn't it?
It is, and because they're purer, they're actually, insignificant in thinking. The very clear analysis on this is that you see people getting angry about the impacts of large-scale migration. And let's look at the Ballymena scenario in its case. If you heard some of the people being interviewed on social media, which is something that our Prime Minister, the government, the police, as you quite rightly identified, Kevin, don't wish to talk about. They've talked about the fact that large-scale numbers of migrants are coming up from Southern Ireland, the Republic, using the European Union's opportunity to cross the border into Northern Ireland and seek housing. And they're able to get housing beyond those people who've lived in those communities for long periods of time, because there is no law that stops somebody who lives locally being able to get preferential treatment. Secondly, they see that the people are getting benefits. They also understand very clearly that companies like Mears, who are receiving huge benefits from the government as the contracts for dealing with asylum seekers, also are going into Ballymena and asking the 2 or 3 large landowners that own most of the housing that we will take contracts for 5 years, thus increasing the cost of housing for those that are able to live in Ballymena. So there are legitimate things relating to housing costs, overcrowding, the implications of crime that are genuine. And when people raised their heads and came out and not rioted, just complained about it, some people did, as you know, took over this and caused riots. But the very fact that these people have got legitimate claims are being ignored by the police and the politicians, and that only leads to greater frustration. And as you say, and Nigel Farage has indicated, this could lead to more and more people becoming increasingly angry, and their only option is to go on the streets. And when they go on the streets, there are those within those crowds who seek to benefit from this by causing more violence. And that's why there might be more riots in the future. None of us want that. But if the government sticks their head in the ground, that's the obvious consequence of ignoring the will of the people.
Exactly right. It is a kind of ostrich-like approach to this. And as I say, this is just going to get worse as long as Keir Starmer refuses to even listen to what these people say. And we should remember, Stephen, it's really important to point this out. Those protests last summer, by definition, the ones throwing the bricks, the ones trying to set fire to the hotels and the mosques, that's going to make the papers. That's dramatic footage, dramatic pictures. That will make the papers, that will make the news bulletins. We should remember that the vast majority of people who protested last summer against the migrant crisis and the results of the migrant crisis, the dilution of their local culture, towns and cities just not looking like they used to. They're just changing before our very eyes with this kind of cultural invasion. So the majority of people who protested last summer against this did so peacefully. And yet we have a Prime Minister that says that every single person who went out onto the streets to complain about the migrant crisis is a far-right thug. It's not good enough.
It's not. You heard today Yvette Cooper in her speech announcing the fact that there would be some form of kind of inquiry to look at, in her words, Pakistani grooming gangs that raped young girls. But then she made a very clear point. Not all Pakistani people or Asian people are actually those sorts of individuals. Yet we do not hear from her or the Prime Minister an acceptance that the vast majority of people protesting in Southport last year or in Ballymena are equally not the same as the thugs who are actually setting fire to it.
Exactly.
That kind of two-tier kind of concept is ingrained upon not only the politicians of the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, but also the former Conservative Party, but across the establishment as a whole. And Kevin, I think also there's one other aspect that links Ballymena, Southport to the grooming gangs is the level of snobbery in this country. I'm all right, Jack, if I live in these really lovely areas of the country, but those poor working class people, they could be ignored because, of course, they don't work. They're lazy. They don't care about their communities in the same way that we do. And when they rise up, why are they not just doing as we tell them to do? And I think that level of snobbery just permeates the whole of our elites who just ignore these people and their wishes, as though their wishes don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, the people who protest, who go out on the streets, they're just far-right thugs. And because they're throwing bricks, let's not even listen to what they're complaining about. It is, as I say, this is a powder keg. And the more Starmer and his gang don't listen, just like they didn't listen about the need for a rape gang inquiry, the more that powder keg is likely to explode. I don't say that with any relish, but we are not the only ones, Stephen, who are a bit worried about the summer ahead. In the meantime, though, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Stephen Wolfe there, migration expert, former MEP, of course, and director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity.